I am Ella, 42 years old, and until last month, I was the Senior Vice President of Product Development at TechVision Innovations. For 20 years, I poured my heart and soul into growing this company from a scrappy startup to an industry titan. Then, one Friday afternoon, our new HR director slid a cardboard box across the conference table and demanded my badge. He had no idea I was about to unleash a contract clause worth $11 million. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on corporate betrayal, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued at work. Looking back, I still remember the day I joined TechVision. It was January 2002, and I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, with a computer science degree and big dreams. The company wasn't even called TechVision then. It was simply Next Gen Solutions, a tiny startup operating out of a converted warehouse space with mismatched furniture and a perpetually broken coffee machine. I was employee number 13, Lucky 13 as our founder Marcus Jensen used to joke. Marcus was 35, then a brilliant software developer with a vision for enterprise security solutions that would change how businesses protected their digital assets. What he lacked in business experience he made up for in pure technical genius and boundless enthusiasm. We might not have fancy offices or expense accounts, Marcus told me during my interview, but what we're building here will change the industry. And I want people who'll grow with us, not just work for us. Those words resonated with me. I wasn't just looking for a job, I wanted to be part of something meaningful. The salary was modest, but Marcus offered stock options and an employment contract that he personally insisted on for all early employees. This protects both of us, he explained as we reviewed the document together. There are some special provisions in here for our founding team. You're taking a risk on us, so we should show our commitment to you. I barely skimmed that section. At 22, job security clauses seemed like distant concerns. I was more excited about the opportunity to create cutting-edge software and the promise of stock options that might someday be valuable. My first project was helping develop our flagship product, Secure Shield, a network security solution that would eventually become the industry standard. I spent countless nights coding, testing, and refining the product. When we landed our first major client 6 months later, the entire office celebrated by ordering pizza and drinking cheap champagne from plastic cups. Those early years were exhilarating. We were underdogs fighting for recognition in a competitive market. Every new client felt like a personal victory. Every product improvement was a team triumph. We weren't just colleagues, we were a family united by a shared mission. By 2005, we had grown to 50 employees and moved into proper offices. Marcus secured our first round of serious venture capital funding, and we expanded our product line. I was promoted to team lead, managing a group of 5 developers. The company continued its upward trajectory. In 2008, despite the economic downturn, our business actually grew as companies sought cost-effective security solutions. We hit 100 employees by 2010, and I was promoted to Director of Product Development, reporting directly to Marcus. Our breakthrough moment came in 2012 when we secured a contract with the federal government. Suddenly, TechVision, we had rebranded by then, was on the map. Major corporations started taking notice. Our annual revenue crossed $50 million. With success came changes. Marcus brought in experienced executives to help manage our growth. The board expanded to include representatives from our investors. We went public in 2015, and our small family atmosphere gradually gave way to corporate policies and hierarchical structures. Through it all, I remained dedicated to our mission. When Marcus offered me the position of Senior Vice President of Product Development in 2016, I accepted without hesitation. My team had grown to over 70 people spread across 3 continents. Our product suite had expanded to include cloud security, identity management, and threat intelligence systems. Marcus and I maintained our close working relationship. He trusted my judgment on product decisions, and I respected his vision for the company. We had our disagreements, but they were always professional and focused on what was best for TechVision. You know why this company works, Ella, Marcus once asked me during a late-night strategy session. Because people like you care about it as much as I do. That's irreplaceable. His words meant everything to me. TechVision wasn't just where I worked. It was a fundamental part of my identity. I had grown up professionally within its walls. My colleagues were my friends. My achievements were intertwined with the company's success. By 2020, TechVision had become a major player in the cybersecurity industry, with over 500 employees globally and annual revenue exceeding $300 million. Our stock price had quadrupled since our IPO, making many early employees, myself included, millionaires on paper. Then came the announcement that would change everything. Marcus was retiring as CEO. After 20 years at the helm, he wanted to step back from day-to-day operations. He would remain on the board but was entrusting the company's future to new leadership. I was shocked but supportive. Marcus had earned his retirement. He assured me that the transition would be smooth and that the company's culture and values would be preserved. The board is bringing in someone experienced, he told me. Patricia Winters has an impressive track record at larger tech companies. She'll help take TechVision to the next level. I nodded and smiled, pushing down my apprehension. Little did I know that this leadership change would set in motion a series of events that would test my loyalty, resolve, and ultimately the very contract I had signed 20 years earlier. Patricia Winters arrived at TechVision headquarters in September 2022 with an impressive resume and a reputation for corporate turnarounds. At 56, she had previously served as CEO at two mid-sized tech companies and had held executive positions at industry giants like Oracle and IBM. The board was thrilled with their selection, touting her experience with scaling businesses and maximizing shareholder value. From our first meeting, I sensed that Patricia and I had fundamentally different visions for TechVision. Where Marcus had prioritized innovation and employee loyalty, Patricia spoke constantly of operational efficiency and market positioning. She was polished, articulate, and ruthlessly focused on metrics. The cybersecurity market is consolidating, she announced during her first all-hands meeting. We need to be leaner, more agile, and strategically positioned for either acquisition or aggressive expansion. Some changes will be necessary. Those changes began almost immediately. Within her first month, Patricia brought in an executive team of her own choosing, Lawrence Peterson as the new HR director, Victoria Zhao as chief marketing officer, and Richard Thompson as CFO. All three came from her previous company and moved as a unit, speaking in shorthand and often meeting privately. My first direct interaction with Lawrence Peterson set off alarm bells. He scheduled a casual coffee chat that turned into an interrogation about my team's structure, budget, and performance metrics. Your department seems overstaffed compared to industry benchmarks, he remarked, reviewing data on his tablet. And your product development cycles are unusually long. We prioritize security and quality testing, I explained. Our clients trust us with their most sensitive data. Rushing development would compromise that trust. Lawrence smiled thinly. Noble sentiments. But the market doesn't reward noble sentiments. It rewards quarterly results. Within weeks, management consultants from McKinsey descended on our offices, conducting interviews and gathering data on organizational efficiency. Teams were required to justify their processes, headcounts, and budgets. The consultants spoke about right-sizing and strategic realignment in bland corporate language that masked their true purpose, identifying cuts. I began noticing subtle changes in how information flowed. I was excluded from certain executive meetings that I had previously attended. Emails about strategic decisions would arrive in my inbox after the decisions had already been made. When I raised concerns about being sidelined, Patricia assured me it was simply due to streamlining communication channels. My attempts to advocate for my team were increasingly met with resistance. During a budget review, I requested additional resources for a promising new security product. The ROI timeline is too long, Richard, the new CFO, stated dismissively. We need products that can generate revenue within 2 quarters, not 2 years. Cybersecurity doesn't work that way, I countered. Our clients need solutions that anticipate threats years in advance. Perhaps that thinking is why TechVision has plateaued, Patricia interjected. We need to be more aggressive. I left that meeting seething with frustration. TechVision hadn't plateaued. We had built sustainable growth based on quality products and customer loyalty. Patricia's version of aggressive seemed to mean sacrificing long-term stability for short-term gains. The situation deteriorated further when several of my trusted colleagues began leaving the company. First went Thomas, our chief technology officer, and one of the original team members who was replaced by Patricia's former colleague. Then Sarah from legal resigned after clashing with the new general counsel. Each departure weakened my support network and isolated me further. Michael, a fellow SVP who had been with the company for 15 years, pulled me aside after submitting his resignation. "They're systematically pushing out Marcus's people," he whispered. "They offered me a package, but it was insulting after my years of service. When I refused, they made my life miserable until leaving felt like my only option." "Why would they do this?" I asked. "We built this company. We know the products, the clients, the culture. Because we're expensive and loyal to the old vision," Michael replied. "Patricia wants her own people who are loyal to her, not to TechVision's history." As the months passed, my isolation grew. Projects I had championed were deprioritized or reassigned. My input was increasingly ignored in product roadmap discussions. I found myself fighting to maintain the quality standards that had made our products industry leaders. The breaking point came during the development of Secure Shield 5.0, our flagship product's new version. My team had designed a revolutionary approach to threat detection that would give us a significant competitive advantage. Patricia and the new CTO decided to scrap most of the innovations in favor of a faster release, with more marketable but less substantive features. During the heated product review meeting, I presented data showing how our approach would benefit clients long term. "The market won't wait for perfection." Patricia cut me off. "We need this release in Q3, not Q4. Rushing it compromises everything we stand for," I argued. "Perhaps what we stand for needs to change," she replied coldly. That evening, I attempted to schedule a private meeting with Patricia to discuss my concerns about the company's direction. Her assistant informed me that her calendar was full for the next 3 weeks, but offered to try to find 15 minutes the following month. The message was clear: my opinion no longer mattered. Despite 20 years of dedication, despite helping build TechVision from nothing into a market leader, I had become an inconvenience to the new regime. As I drove home that night, a sense of dread settled over me. For the first time in my career, I updated my resume and LinkedIn profile. Not because I wanted to leave TechVision, but because I was increasingly certain that TechVision, or at least this new version of it, wanted to leave me. The meeting request arrived in my inbox at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Budget review discussion. HR conference room. 5:00 p.m. No agenda, no attachments, just a cryptic title and an immediate time frame that ensured most employees would have already left for the weekend. I knew instantly what it meant. After 20 years at TechVision, I was about to be fired. With shaking hands, I backed up personal files from my computer and gathered a few meaningful items from my desk: a photo with Marcus and the original team at our first industry conference, a plaque commemorating our patent for Secure Shield's core technology, and a small jade elephant a grateful client had given me years ago. I sent a quick text to my husband, meeting with HR. Might be late. Don't wait for dinner. The walk to the HR conference room felt surreal. I passed walls decorated with company milestones, product launches, awards, press features, many of which I had personally contributed to. Employees I had hired and mentored waved cheerfully, unaware that I might never walk these halls again. When I entered the conference room, 3 people were waiting: Lawrence Peterson, the HR director, Diane from legal, and a security guard discreetly positioned by the door. On the table sat a cardboard box, the universal symbol of corporate termination. "Ella, thank you for coming," Lawrence began, not bothering to stand or offer a handshake. "We'll try to make this brief." I remained standing, unwilling to accept the premise of the meeting quite yet. "What exactly is this about Lawrence?" "Please have a seat," he gestured to the chair across from him. "As you know, TechVision is undergoing strategic realignment to position ourselves for future growth." The corporate doublespeak was infuriating. After 20 years, I deserved better than templated termination language. "Skip the euphemisms," I said. "You're firing me. At least have the courtesy to be direct about it." Lawrence's expression tightened. "Very well. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. The company is moving in a new direction, and frankly, your leadership style is not aligned with our vision going forward. He slid a folder across the table. This contains your severance agreement. We're offering 3 months' salary and benefits continuation, which is generous considering the circumstances. In exchange, we require a standard non-disclosure agreement and a non-disparagement clause. I didn't touch the folder. What circumstances would those be? Let's not make this difficult. Lawrence sighed. The decision has been made at the highest levels. Patricia feels your resistance to change has become an obstacle to progress. So there it was. My crime was loyalty to the company's founding principles. I felt a surge of anger but maintained my composure. I'd like to review these documents with my attorney before signing anything. Lawrence frowned. The terms are non-negotiable. We need your badge and company devices before you leave today. The security team has already deactivated your access. I glanced at the box on the table. You packed up my office without giving me the chance to do it myself. Just standard items from your desk, Diane from legal interjected. You can collect anything we missed on Monday with an escort. The indignity of it all. 20 years of service and I would need an escort to clean out my own office. I felt a cold fury building inside me, but also something else. A distant memory of my original employment contract drafted when TechVision was still a startup called Next Gen Solutions. I'll need to email these documents to myself, I said, reaching for the folder. Lawrence hesitated, exchanging glances with Diane. We can mail you a physical copy. My contract specifies that any termination notice must be provided digitally, as well as in physical form, I stated, making up the provision on the spot. I'm sure you wouldn't want to violate the terms of my employment agreement. It was a bluff, but it worked. Diane nodded reluctantly and Lawrence pushed his laptop toward me. Fine, but please be quick. We have other meetings. I scanned the termination agreement, which confirmed my suspicions they were trying to push me out quickly and cheaply. The 3-month severance was insultingly low for an executive with my tenure. More importantly, there was no mention of my stock options or the special provisions for founding team members. I forwarded the documents to my personal email, and my attorney's address, then closed the laptop. Lawrence immediately reached for my company badge. I need that before you leave. I removed my badge slowly, looking at the photo taken years ago when we had first implemented the security system. I handed it over, but not before saying, You know, Lawrence, there's something important you seem to have overlooked. And what's that? He asked dismissively. My original contract has some very specific terms regarding termination after 15 years of service, terms that Marcus insisted on for all founding team members. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Lawrence's face. All standard contracts were reviewed during the leadership transition. There's nothing irregular about your termination. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and picked up the box with my belongings. We'll see about that. I'll be in touch through my attorney. As I walked out, Lawrence called after me. The severance offer expires in 48 hours, Ella. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I turned back one last time. 20 years of my life built this company, Lawrence. Did you really think I'd let you erase that with a 48-hour deadline and a cardboard box? The security guard looked uncomfortable as he escorted me to the elevator, then to my car in the parking garage. As he walked away, I sat in my vehicle, hands trembling on the steering wheel, a mixture of rage and shock coursing through me. I had just been fired from the only real job I'd ever had. The company I helped build had discarded me like an outdated piece of equipment. But beneath the hurt and anger, a small voice reminded me of something Marcus had once said when we were reviewing those early contracts. These clauses might seem unnecessary now, but someday they might be the only thing standing between you. And corporate amnesia about loyalty. With newfound determination, I pulled out my phone and called Benjamin Wright, my attorney for the past 15 years. They did what Benjamin's voice rose in disbelief as I recounted the termination meeting from my car in the TechVision parking garage. Fired me. Effective immediately. 3 months severance for 20 years of service. I replied, the reality of the situation still sinking in. That's absurd, Benjamin said. Did they mention anything about your original employment agreement, the special provisions? No, they treated it like a standard executive termination. Lawrence seemed completely unaware of any special contractual obligations. I could hear Benjamin shuffling papers on the other end of the line. I've still got your original contract in our files. Give me a few minutes to review it and call you back. Don't sign anything. While waiting for Benjamin's call, I sat in my car watching employees leave for the weekend, many of whom I had hired, mentored, or worked alongside for years. None of them knew I had just been fired. By Monday, there would likely be a carefully worded email announcing my decision to pursue other opportunities or some equally transparent corporate fiction. My phone rang 15 minutes later. Ella Benjamin's voice had that tone attorneys get when they've discovered something significant. I've reviewed your original employment agreement from 2002, including all amendments and updates. Do you recall the founding employee protection clause that Marcus insisted on, including for the first 20 employees? My memory was vague. Something about extended notice periods. Much more than that, Benjamin replied. For employees who remained with the company for at least 15 years, any termination without cause requires full board approval, not just executive decision. Additionally, such termination triggers what amounts to a golden parachute, 2% of the company's current market valuation. I gasped. 2%. What's TechVision worth now? Based on current stock price and outstanding shares. I heard keyboard clicks. Approximately $550 million. The math wasn't difficult. That's $11 million. $11 million, Benjamin confirmed. Plus, the clause specifically states this payment is separate from and in addition to any standard severance stock options or other compensation. And it can't be waived or reduced except by mutual written agreement. My mind reeled. The implications were staggering. Do you think they know about this? Given how they handled your termination, absolutely not. This kind of liability would have been flagged during due diligence, if they were aware of it. My guess is that when Patricia took over, they reviewed standard executive contracts, but not these special founding employee agreements. What should we do? I asked. I'm drafting an email right now citing the relevant contract provisions. I'll send it to HR Legal, the CEO, and the CFO. Might as well copy the board chair, too. This isn't something they can sweep under the rug. True to his word, Benjamin sent the email within 20 minutes. It was professional but unambiguous. My termination had been procedurally improper and triggered a contractual obligation of $11 million plus standard severance and vested stock options. The response was almost immediate. First came an email from Diane in legal requesting an urgent call with Benjamin. Then my phone rang. Richard Thompson, the CFO. Ella, his normally confident voice was shaking. There has to be some mistake. I mean this contract clause you're citing. It can't possibly be enforceable after all these years. It's completely enforceable, Richard, I replied calmly. Marcus created that clause specifically to protect founding employees from exactly this kind of situation. All communications should go through my attorney now. But $11 million. That's nearly our entire quarterly profit. Patricia is furious. She's saying you're trying to extort the company. I'm not the one who violated a binding contract, I replied. I've given 20 years to TechVision. I helped build it from nothing. All I'm asking is that the company honor its legal obligations. After Richard's call, my phone exploded with notifications, emails from board members, texts from confused colleagues who had somehow heard rumors, voicemails from Patricia demanding I call her immediately to resolve this misunderstanding. I turned off my phone. This wasn't a battle to be fought in hasty phone calls or emotional confrontations. Benjamin would handle the legal communications, and I needed time to process everything that had happened. The weekend passed in a blur of contradictory emotions. Shock at how quickly my career at TechVision had ended. Anger at the callous way Patricia and Lawrence had handled my termination. Vindication that Marcus's foresight had protected me from being discarded without consequence. Anxiety about what would come next in my professional life. And yes, a certain satisfaction knowing that my abrupt termination would cost the company dearly. By Sunday evening, TechVision's legal team had formally requested a meeting for Monday morning. They proposed a mutual resolution discussion with senior leadership board representatives and legal counsel present. They're panicking, Benjamin told me during our prep call. This kind of liability wasn't in their financial planning, and the procedural violation of terminating you without board approval puts them in a precarious position legally. What's our strategy? I asked. We attend, we listen, but we don't commit to anything immediately. They'll likely try to negotiate the amount down or offer alternative compensation, like additional stock options. Remember, you're negotiating from a position of strength. They breached the contract, not you. As I prepared for bed Sunday night, my husband squeezed my hand. Are you okay? This is a lot to process in one weekend. I considered the question carefully. I'm sad that it ended this way. Tech Vision was more than a job to me, but I'm also angry enough to not let them get away with it. And maybe a little relieved that Marcus had the foresight to include protection that gives me time to figure out what comes next. Whatever you decide, he said, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I fell asleep thinking about the meeting ahead, wondering how Patricia would react face to face, and considering what I truly wanted as an outcome. The money was significant, but this was about more than financial compensation. It was about respect, recognition, and ensuring that 20 years of dedication wasn't erased by a 48-hour severance deadline and a cardboard box. Monday morning arrived with a surreal quality. Just 3 days after being escorted from the building, I was walking back through the main entrance of Tech Vision headquarters. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when I presented my driver's license instead of my badge. Miss Reynolds, he confirmed, checking a list. They're expecting you in the executive boardroom, 4th floor. As I rode the elevator up, I straightened my navy blue suit jacket and took a deep breath. Benjamin had coached me on maintaining composure regardless of what happened in the meeting. Let them see a professional who knows her worth, he had advised. The boardroom door was open when I arrived. Inside sat Patricia Winters at the head of the table, flanked by Richard Thompson, the CFO, and Diane from legal. 3 board members were present: Jonathan Chen, the board chair, Barbara Miller, who had been an early investor, and William Davis, a newer addition representing our largest institutional investor. Lawrence Peterson, the HR director who had so coldly dismissed me on Friday, was notably absent. Benjamin was already seated reviewing documents. He stood as I entered, a subtle show of respect that wasn't lost on the others. No one else stood. Ella Patricia began, her tone professionally neutral. Thank you for joining us. We thought it best to discuss this situation directly rather than through intermediaries. I took a seat beside Benjamin. I appreciate the opportunity for dialogue. Patricia nodded to Diane, who distributed folders to everyone present. We've prepared a summary of the situation as we understand it, along with some options for resolution. Benjamin opened his folder first, quickly scanning the contents. His expression revealed nothing, but he placed a hand on my arm, our prearranged signal that the company was taking this seriously. Jonathan Chen, the board chair, cleared his throat. Before we dive into specifics, I want to acknowledge that there appears to have been a procedural oversight regarding your termination, Ella. Board approval should have been sought per your original contract. That didn't happen, and for that I apologize. It was a carefully worded non-apology that accepted a procedural error without acknowledging the broader implications, but it was more than I had expected. Patricia looked distinctly uncomfortable with Chen's statement. While there may have been an administrative oversight, the fundamental business decision remains sound. Tech Vision is evolving, and we need leadership aligned with our new direction. The decision may be sound. From your perspective, Benjamin interjected, but the manner in which it was executed violated a binding contract and triggered significant financial obligations. Richard Thompson, the CFO, winced visibly. About those obligations, we believe there's room for interpretation regarding the valuation calculation and the applicability of a 20-year-old contract clause in today's corporate environment. Benjamin smiled thinly. The clause is remarkably specific, actually. 2% of market capitalization as determined by the 30-day average stock price preceding termination. By our calculation, that's $11,042,600 plus standard severance and vested options. Barbara Miller, who had known Marcus personally and invested in our Series A round, looked troubled. I wasn't aware of these special contract provisions. Were other founding employees given similar terms? Patricia and Richard exchanged a glance that confirmed my suspicion they hadn't checked other early employee contracts for similar clauses. We're conducting a comprehensive review of all legacy agreements, Diane from legal said smoothly. Our preliminary assessment suggests this type of provision was limited to a small number of executives. 17 to be exact, I stated. Everyone who joined in the first 2 years and stayed at least 15 years. Marcus was very consistent about protecting early employees who demonstrated long-term loyalty. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the implications sank in. If other long-term employees had similar clauses and were targeted for strategic realignment, the financial impact could be devastating. William Davis, representing the institutional investors, leaned forward. Let's focus on resolving the immediate situation. What would you consider a reasonable settlement, Ella? Before I could answer, Benjamin intervened. My client isn't obligated to negotiate down from what the contract explicitly provides. This isn't about finding a reasonable middle ground. It's about honoring a binding legal obligation. Patricia's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. $11 million for an employee termination? That's more than our entire executive bonus pool. The board can't possibly approve this. The board already approved it 20 years ago when they ratified these employment agreements, Benjamin countered. And Marcus Jensen, who was CEO and board chair at the time, specifically designed these provisions to ensure founding employees couldn't be discarded without significant consideration. Jonathan Chen raised a hand to calm the tension. Perhaps we should discuss alternatives. Ella, would you consider a reinstatement to your position, or perhaps a different role within the organization? The question gave me pause. 24 hours earlier, I might have considered it. But sitting across from Patricia, seeing the barely concealed hostility in her expression, I knew there was no going back. The company culture had changed too fundamentally. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I don't believe that would be productive for anyone involved. Tech Vision is clearly moving in a new direction, and Patricia deserves to build her own team. Patricia seemed surprised by my response, perhaps expecting me to fight for my job. However, I continued, I do have concerns that extend beyond my own situation. There are other long-term employees who helped build this company and deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of organizational changes. Barbara Miller nodded in agreement. That's a fair point. How we treat our people reflects our values as a company. For the next 2 hours, we engaged in detailed negotiations. The company attempted various approaches to reduce their financial exposure, offering enhanced stock options instead of cash, proposing a consulting arrangement to justify the payment, suggesting an extended payment schedule to spread the K, unpacked across multiple quarters. Benjamin deflected each attempt skillfully, always returning to the clear language of the contract. As the discussion progressed, it became evident that Tech Vision had no legal grounds to avoid the payment. Their only leverage was the potential for a lengthy court battle and negative publicity, but Benjamin had prepared for that contingency with a draft press release describing how the company was attempting to evade contractual obligations to a founding employee. By early afternoon, the outlines of an agreement emerged. I would receive the full contractual amount of $11 million plus standard severance, though structured as a combination of immediate payment and deferred compensation for tax purposes. In exchange, I would sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement and assist with a smooth transition of my projects and team. As we neared conclusion, I raised one additional point. I'd like a commitment that other long-term employees will be treated fairly if further restructuring occurs. Not special treatment, just transparent communication, appropriate recognition of their contributions, and adherence to their contractual rights. Patricia started to object, but Jonathan Chen intervened. That's a reasonable request. The board will ensure all restructuring plans include a thorough review of contractual obligations and appropriate transition planning. As the meeting wrapped up, Chen asked to speak with me privately. Patricia looked displeased but left with the others, leaving just Chen and me in the boardroom. This isn't how anyone wanted this to go, he said once we were alone. I respect what you've built here, Ella. For what it's worth, the board wasn't consulted about your termination beforehand. That's actually worth quite a lot to hear, I replied. Tech Vision has been my professional home for 2 decades. I would have preferred a dignified transition, not whatever Friday was supposed to be. Chen nodded. Patricia has been instructed to issue a formal apology for how this was handled, and Lawrence Peterson is being removed as HR director effective immediately. I raised an eyebrow. That was quick. $11 million of unplanned liability tends to accelerate personnel decisions, Chen said with a grim smile. The board values your discretion as we work through this transition. As I left the building that afternoon, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the confrontation was over. Vindication that my contributions had been ultimately recognized, even if it took a legal threat to make it happen. Sadness at the formal ending of my Tech Vision career, and uncertainty about what would come next. Benjamin called as I drove home. Congratulations. That went about as well as it could have. The formal settlement documents should be ready for review tomorrow. Thank you for everything, I said. I couldn't have navigated this without you. That's what attorneys are for, he replied. And Ella, for what it's worth, Marcus would be proud of how you handled yourself today. That simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In the midst of corporate politics and legal negotiations, it was easy to forget the human relationships that had defined my career. Marcus had believed in me enough to include contractual protection that would only activate years later. His foresight had given me not just financial security, but the leverage to exit with dignity. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone pinged with a company-wide email from Patricia Winters announcing my departure. After 20 years of valuable contributions to Tech Vision, Ella Reynolds has decided to pursue new opportunities. We thank her for her service and wish her well in future endeavors. It was corporate speak, for she's gone, but at least it acknowledged my tenure. Progress of a sort. Tomorrow would bring more negotiations, paperwork, and decisions. But tonight I allowed myself to begin processing the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. The following week brought a flurry of activity as the formal separation agreement took shape. Benjamin and Tech Vision's legal team worked through the details of the financial settlement confidentiality provisions and transition responsibilities. I was surprised when Patricia Winters requested a private meeting at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant downtown away from corporate eyes and ears. Against Benjamin's advice, I agreed to meet her. Despite everything, I was curious about her perspective. Patricia arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably as always in a charcoal suit that projected authority. After ordering coffee, she got straight to the point. I owe you an apology, Ella. The way your termination was handled was unprofessional and disrespectful to someone of your tenure and contributions. The words seemed rehearsed but sincere enough. Thank you for acknowledging that, I replied. Though I suspect the $11 million price tag helped motivate the apology. A tight smile. You're not wrong, but that's not the only reason I wanted to meet. I need to understand something. Why did Marcus build such an expensive exit clause into those early contracts? It's practically unheard of for a startup. The question revealed how fundamentally Patricia misunderstood Tech Vision's origins. It wasn't about money, I explained. It was about creating a company where loyalty went both ways. Marcus believed that if employees committed their careers to building Tech Vision, the company should be equally committed to them. That's admirable but financially unsustainable, Patricia countered. A public company has obligations to shareholders. And to employees, I added. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Tech Vision succeeded precisely because people were willing to pour everything into building it, knowing they were valued beyond quarterly metrics. Patricia considered this. The board has instructed me to review all remaining founding employee contracts and develop appropriate transition plans that respect their terms. Lawrence has been reassigned to a regional office. Demoted rather than fired, I observed. Interesting how accountability works at different levels. Patricia had the grace to look uncomfortable. Politics is part of corporate life, as you well know. The official announcement will frame your departure as a mutually agreed separation, with a consulting arrangement to recognize your contributions. And the $11 million will be classified as deferred compensation and intellectual property acquisition in the financial statements. The full amount won't be visible as a single line item. Corporate face, saving at its finest. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. What about the other long-term employees? Will they be protected? Those with similar contract provisions will be handled differently, Patricia conceded. For others, we're developing enhanced severance packages that recognize tenure. The board was quite insistent after your situation. We spent another hour discussing the transition of my team and projects. Despite our differences, Patricia was undeniably competent, and I found myself respecting her strategic vision for TechVision, even if I disagreed with her methods. As we prepared to leave, she offered a final thought. For what it's worth, if I had known your full history with the company and reviewed your contract personally, things would have been handled very differently. I appreciate that, I replied. But systems that allow loyal employees to be discarded without proper review are broken by design, not just by execution. The formal announcement of my departure came the following day, carefully worded to suggest a planned transition rather than a termination. My inbox filled with messages from colleagues, some confused, others supportive, a few seeking reassurance about their own positions. I responded to each one, personally maintaining professional discretion about the circumstances while offering whatever guidance and encouragement I could. For my direct reports, I arranged individual coffee meetings to discuss their projects and career paths. The settlement was finalized within 2 weeks. The financial implications were life-changing $11 million in structured payments plus standard severance and accelerated vesting of stock options worth another $2 million. After taxes, I would have financial security that most people only dream about. But money couldn't replace the sense of purpose and belonging I had lost. TechVision had been my professional identity for my entire adult life. Now, I had to figure out who I was without it. My last official day arrived with a strange mix of formality and awkwardness. I was permitted to clean out my office personally, though with a transition coordinator present, a euphemism for being watched. Former colleagues stopped by to say goodbye, many with tears and reminiscences. As I packed 20 years of professional life into boxes, I found myself lingering over artifacts from the company's history. The original product specifications for Secure Shield, handwritten by Marcus on legal pads, a bottle of champagne saved from our IPO celebration, countless awards and recognition plaques that traced our growth from scrappy startup to industry leader. Thomas, the former CTO who had left months earlier, called as I was finishing. Heard the news, he said without preamble. Corporate doublespeak aside, we all know what really happened. How are you holding up? Processing, I replied honestly. It's surreal after 20 years. Word is you extracted a golden parachute that made the board apoplectic. Thomas chuckled. Good for you. Most of us just took the standard package and walked away. Marcus included special provisions in the founding team contracts, I explained. Apparently, the new regime never bothered to read them carefully. Classic, Thomas said. Listen, once the dust settles, a bunch of us ex-TechVision folks meet monthly for drinks and war stories. You should join us. Turns out there's life after corporate identity death. The invitation was exactly what I needed. A reminder that the relationships built over 2 decades didn't disappear with a terminated employment contract. As I carried the last box to my car, I passed Patricia in the lobby. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave a small formal nod of acknowledgement. Not friendship, not warmth, but a certain professional respect. It was enough. Driving away from TechVision headquarters, I felt a weight lifting. The anger and betrayal remained, but alongside them grew something unexpected, a sense of possibility. For the first time in 20 years, my future was entirely my own to shape. The contract clause had given me not just financial security, but freedom to reimagine my professional identity on my own terms. That evening, as my husband opened a bottle of champagne to mark this transition, he asked the question that would define the next chapter of my life. So what do you want to do now that you can do anything? I didn't have an answer yet. But thanks to Marcus's foresight and my own willingness to stand firm, I had the luxury of time to figure it out. The first month after leaving TechVision passed in a blur of administrative tasks, setting up meetings with financial advisors to manage the settlement funds, consulting with tax specialists about the implications of my sudden wealth, and fielding calls from former colleagues and industry connections, curious about what had happened and what I planned to do next. I deliberately took no immediate action regarding my career. After 20 years of constant work, I needed time to decompress and reflect. My husband and I took a 3-week trip to Italy, something we had always talked about but never found the time for. Walking through ancient ruins and art museums provided valuable perspective, a reminder that careers and companies come and go, but life's experiences and relationships endure. Upon returning home, I began meeting with former TechVision colleagues who had left or been pushed out during Patricia's restructuring. Thomas's monthly gathering of ex-employees became a source of support and camaraderie. There was something therapeutic about sharing stories with people who understood the company's culture and history. "Have you heard the latest Sarah from legal?" asked during one such gathering. Lawrence Peterson was promoted to a special project in the Singapore office, effectively exiled after the contract debacle. And 3 other founding team members with similar contract clauses were suddenly given expanded roles and equity refreshes, Michael added. Amazing how quickly priorities shift when there are financial consequences. These updates confirmed that my stand had created ripple effects throughout the organization. It wasn't just about my individual situation. It had forced a reckoning with how the company treated long-term employees. By the 3rd month, I began considering what came next professionally. Job offers had started arriving. Competitors eager to capitalize on my experience and industry connections. Venture capital firms seeking expertise for their portfolio companies. Even an inquiry about a potential CEO role at a security startup. Each opportunity was flattering but didn't feel right. The corporate world suddenly seemed confining after my experience. The idea of building someone else's vision subject to the same kind of leadership changes and political dynamics held little appeal. The turning point came during a conversation with Marcus Jensen, who had reached out after hearing about my departure. We met at a small coffee shop near his home, far from the corporate environment where our professional relationship had developed. "I always knew that clause would matter someday," he said after hearing my story, "though I hoped it would never be needed." "Why did you include it?" I asked. "It wasn't standard practice even for early employees." Marcus smiled thoughtfully. "When we started the company, I made a promise to myself that success wouldn't change how we treated people. That clause was my insurance policy against future leadership forgetting where TechVision came from and who built it." "Well, it worked," I acknowledged. "Though not quite how you intended, I suspect." "Actually, it worked exactly as intended," Marcus countered. "It ensured you couldn't be discarded without consequence. The money wasn't the point. The recognition of value was." As we continued talking, Marcus shared his own post-TechVision journey, the consulting he did selectively, the mentoring of young entrepreneurs, the board roles he had chosen carefully based on company values rather than prestige. "The greatest freedom is getting to choose work that aligns with your values," he observed. "Not everyone gets that opportunity." His words stayed with me. The settlement had given me financial freedom, but the real opportunity was the freedom to define success on my own terms. Over the following weeks, an idea began taking shape. There was a gap in the cybersecurity market, a need for strategic consulting that bridged technical expertise with business acumen. Large consulting firms offered generic advice while specialized security vendors pushed product solutions. Few advisors truly understood both worlds. I began sketching a business plan for a boutique consulting practice focused on helping companies develop security strategies aligned with their business objectives. No products to sell, no venture capital to chase, just expertise, integrity, and client focus. Using a portion of my settlement funds, I established Reynolds Strategic Security Advisors. I leased a small office space, built a simple website, and began reaching out to contacts from my years in the industry. My first client was a mid-sized financial services company struggling with regulatory compliance and security architecture. The CEO had previously worked with TechVision and reached out based on our prior relationship. The project was challenging and engaging, allowing me to apply my technical knowledge while learning about an industry I hadn't previously worked in. As word spread about my new venture, former TechVision colleagues began contacting me. Some were looking for advice on their own career transitions. Others were interested in collaboration opportunities. A few were seeking refuge from the continuing changes at TechVision. 6 months after launching, I brought on my first 2 associates, Thomas, the former CTO, and Sarah from legal. Both brought complementary expertise and shared my vision of building a consultancy based on integrity and client value rather than maximizing billable hours. This feels like early Tech Vision, Thomas remarked one evening as we worked late preparing for a client presentation. Small team, important work, no corporate nonsense. He was right. There was an energy and purpose to our work that reminded me of what I had loved most about my early career. Solving meaningful problems with talented people who cared about doing things right. As the business grew, I was careful to structure it according to the values I had found missing in the corporate world. We declined projects that didn't align with our expertise or ethics. We built explicit protections for work-life balance into our operating agreements. We shared profits equitably and transparently. 1 year after my termination from Tech Vision, Reynolds Strategic Security Advisors had grown to a team of 8 consultants with clients across multiple industries. We were profitable, respected, and most importantly, creating the kind of workplace culture I had always valued. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia Winter's attempt to push me out had ultimately led to the most fulfilling chapter of my professional life. The contract clause that Marcus had insisted on 20 years earlier had not only provided financial security, but had given me the freedom to reinvent myself on my own terms. News about Tech Vision continued to reach me through former colleagues and industry gossip. Patricia's restructuring had delivered the promised efficiency gains and stock price improvements in the short term, but innovation had suffered. Their last 2 product releases had been met with lukewarm market reception, and several key technical staff had departed for competitors. I took no pleasure in these struggles. Too many good people still worked there, including many I had hired and mentored. But I recognized the predictable pattern of prioritizing short-term metrics over long-term innovation and culture. The most meaningful validation came unexpectedly. A year and a half after my departure, I received an email from Barbara Miller, the board member who had known Marcus from the early days. "I'm retiring from the Tech Vision board next month," she wrote. "Before I go, I wanted you to know that your situation sparked important conversations about how we treat long-term employees and preserve institutional knowledge. The board has implemented new policies requiring review of all executive terminations and recognition programs for tenure. It's not everything you advocated for, but it's progress. Thought you'd want to know your impact continues." Reading her message, I felt a sense of closure. My 20 years at Tech Vision hadn't ended as I would have chosen, but they had mattered, both in building the company and in influencing its future practices. The journey from terminated executive to successful business owner had taught me invaluable lessons about corporate loyalty, the importance of knowing your worth, and the power of standing up for yourself. Most importantly, it had taught me that professional identity is something you create, not something assigned to you by a title or company. As I looked around at the thriving consultancy we had built, I realized that the contract clause worth $11 million had given me something far more valuable than money. It had given me the opportunity to redefine success on my own terms and create a working environment that reflected my deepest values. Life after corporate betrayal wasn't just possible, it was potentially far richer than staying in a situation where loyalty only flowed one way. Sometimes the end of one chapter is exactly what you need to write a better story. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself professionally or faced a major career transition? Drop a comment below sharing your experience or what you would have done in my situation. Don't forget to like this video if you found my story helpful, and subscribe for more real-life lessons from the corporate world. Remember, knowing your worth isn't just about salary, it's about demanding the respect you've earned. Thank you for watching, and may your own career journey be filled with contracts that protect you and opportunities that fulfill you.